The night Daniel Mercer left his wife, he believed he was walking out of a small life, never imagining that 7 days later, he would be standing inside a glass tower with her name carved into the wall above him. Claire Whitman had set the dining table for two because that was what she still did. Even after months of silence had turned their marriage into a room where every word echoed. It was their 7th anniversary, and outside their quiet home in Westchester, New York, October rain slid down the windows in silver lines. The roast chicken had gone cold. The candles had burned low. Claire stood beside the kitchen island in the deep blue dress Daniel once said made her look like the kind of woman a man came home to, but tonight, when he walked in, he did not look at the dress. He looked at the floor, then at his suitcase by the door, then at the plain gold band on his finger like it had become too heavy to carry. "I found someone," he said. No warm-up. No apology. Just 3 words dropped onto the tile between them. Claire felt the sound leave the room before she did. The refrigerator hummed. Rain tapped the glass. Somewhere down the hall, the old grandfather clock clicked toward 8. She looked at the suitcase first because it was easier than looking at his face. "Someone from work?" she asked, though she already knew. Daniel's jaw tightened. "Her name is Vanessa. She is not the reason this happened." Claire almost smiled at the careful cruelty of that sentence. People who betrayed you always wanted credit for honesty and forgiveness for timing. Then what is the reason? Daniel exhaled like he had been waiting years to say it. "I need a life that moves forward, Claire. I need someone who still makes me feel alive." He glanced around the kitchen at the framed family photos, the clean counters, the safe little rituals he used to ask for and now acted ashamed of. "You became comfortable. Predictable. Invisible." That word landed harder than all the others. Invisible. Claire's fingers curled against the edge of the counter, but she did not raise her voice. She did not throw the ring dish. She did not beg him to remember the nights she stayed awake while he built his career, the calls she edited before his investor meetings, the quiet money she moved when his company nearly collapsed. She only looked at the man who had mistaken her silence for emptiness. "Did you ever love me, Daniel?" For the first time he looked uncomfortable. Not guilty. Just uncomfortable, as if her pain was an unexpected delay in his clean exit. "I loved who you were before you stopped becoming anything." Then he removed his wedding ring and placed it beside the untouched dinner plate. A soft metallic click. Small sound. Permanent damage. He picked up his suitcase, adjusted his coat, and opened the door to the wet black night. Before leaving, he reached into his pocket and set his house key on the table too. "Keep the house," he said. "It is the least I can do." The door closed behind him with a quiet finality that made the whole room feel larger and colder. Claire stood there for a long time, listening to his car roll down the driveway, watching the candle flame tremble in the draft. Then she moved slowly, not toward the ring, not toward the key, but toward the narrow drawer beneath the mail tray. Inside, under a stack of unopened envelopes and grocery receipts, lay a matte black access card she had not used in almost a year. Silver letters caught the candlelight as she lifted it between 2 fingers. Whitman and Cole Executive Access. Her thumb brushed over the name printed beneath the logo. Claire Whitman. Not Mrs. Mercer. Not Daniel's invisible wife. Claire Whitman. The name she had buried so deep in other people's comfort that even her husband had forgotten to ask what it meant. Her phone buzzed once on the counter. A message preview lit the screen from Ethan Cole. "Claire, we need you at the board review Monday. It concerns Daniel Mercer." Claire stared at the message while the rain kept falling, while Daniel's ring sat cooling beside a dinner he no longer deserved, while the house he thought he had generously left her stood silent around the woman who had owned far more than he ever knew. And for the first time that night, Claire did not feel abandoned. She felt awake. By Monday morning, the house no longer smelled like roast chicken and candle smoke. It smelled like coffee gone cold, rain-soaked leaves by the back door, and the kind of silence that arrives after someone takes their noise with them. Claire had not slept much. She had folded Daniel's napkin, cleared his plate, and placed his wedding ring in a small white bowl near the sink, not because she wanted to keep it, but because she did not yet know where a failed promise was supposed to go. Her phone had not stopped buzzing since sunrise. First came a message from her neighbor Marcy, gentle and awkward, asking if she was all right. Then came 2 missed calls from Daniel's mother, followed by one text that said, "I hope you will not make this difficult for him." Claire read it twice, then set the phone face down. Difficult. That was what people called a woman when she stopped making betrayal convenient. By 10 o'clock, the first photo appeared online. Daniel, freshly shaved, wearing a navy suit Claire had once picked out for him, standing in front of a 40-story glass tower in Midtown Manhattan. Vanessa Reed leaned beside him in a cream coat, bright smile, perfect hair, one hand resting lightly on his arm. Above them, the silver sign of Whitman and Cole Holdings caught the morning sun. Daniel's caption read, "New chapter. New team. New life." For a long moment, Claire just looked at the picture. Not at Vanessa. Not even at Daniel. Her eyes stayed on the name above the revolving doors. Whitman and Cole. The world saw a corporate logo. Daniel saw a ladder. Claire saw 10 years of quiet decisions, late nights, legal papers, private investments, and the old family name she had protected while letting everyone believe she was merely someone's wife. A second message arrived from a woman Claire barely knew from Daniel's office. "I am so sorry. He is telling everyone this was mutual." Claire locked the screen. Mutual. Another soft word people used when the truth had sharp edges. She moved through the house slowly, room by room, noticing all the places where she had made herself smaller. Daniel's golf bag by the mudroom. Daniel's awards in the study. Daniel's framed magazine article on the wall, the one that called him a rising force in regional finance. Claire had stood just outside the photo that day because Daniel said the picture looked cleaner with only him in it. At the time she had laughed. Now she remembered Ethan Cole's voice from years ago, calm and certain, telling her, "One day, Claire, you will regret letting small men stand in front of big work." Back then, she had told him Daniel was not small. She had believed love meant giving someone room to become their best self. She had not understood that some people used your room to build a stage, and then asked you to clap from the dark. Near noon, Claire drove the 22 miles into Manhattan, not because Ethan had demanded it, but because the message on her phone had opened a door she could no longer pretend was not there. The Hudson shimmered gray under the cloudy sky. Traffic crawled along the highway. Her black access card rested in the cup holder, face up, catching tiny flashes of light whenever the car moved. At a red light, she glanced at it and remembered the first time she had held that card. The day Whitman and Cole bought a failing logistics firm and saved 400 jobs. Daniel had called it a lucky investment. Ethan had called it leadership. Claire had called it necessary. When she reached Midtown, she parked across the street from the tower instead of entering. For several minutes, she sat behind the windshield and watched employees stream through the revolving doors with badges, coffee cups, laptop bags, and Monday faces. Somewhere inside, Daniel was beginning the life he thought would finally make him powerful. Somewhere inside, Vanessa was probably smiling at the desk she believed he had earned for them both. Claire watched the silver letters above the entrance until they blurred slightly in the glass. Then her phone lit again. Ethan Cole. No greeting this time. Just one sentence. "He is here, and the board has found more than we expected." Claire closed her eyes, inhaled once, and picked up the access card. The woman Daniel had left behind in a quiet kitchen was gone. The woman stepping out of the car had carried his secrets long enough. The lobby of Whitman and Cole Holdings always had a way of making people lower their voices. 40 stories of glass rose above marble floors so polished they reflected every step, every nervous smile, every person who walked in believing the building could change their life. Claire paused just outside the revolving doors, the black access card warm in her palm, and for one quiet second she could almost hear Daniel from years ago, laughing as he told her corporate towers were built for people who knew how to take up space. He never noticed she had helped buy one. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cedar, espresso, and expensive flowers. A security guard in a dark suit looked up from the front desk, ready to ask for her name. Then his expression shifted when he saw the card between her fingers. Not surprise exactly. Recognition. Respect. "Good afternoon, Ms. Whitman," he said, standing straighter. The sound of her own name in that lobby moved through her like a match struck in a dark room. She nodded softly. "Good afternoon, Paul." He pressed a button, and the executive gate unlocked with a smooth click. Claire stepped through. No announcement. No spotlight. Just a door opening because it had always belonged to her. As she crossed the lobby, she noticed Daniel near the far seating area. One hand wrapped around a paper coffee cup, the other resting lightly at Vanessa's back while she spoke to a young assistant as if the girl should be grateful to breathe the same air. Daniel had not seen Claire yet. He was smiling that new smile, the one polished for people he wanted to impress. His suit was crisp, his watch bright, his posture full of borrowed certainty. Vanessa tilted her head toward the elevator banks and said something that made him laugh. Claire felt nothing dramatic then. No storm, no broken heart music. Only a strange, clean distance. He looked smaller in the building than he had ever looked in their kitchen. Her phone buzzed again. Ethan's message appeared across the screen. Conference room 12. Bring the card. Bring no apology. Claire slid the phone into her coat pocket and moved toward the private elevator. That was when Daniel finally turned. His smile faded, then came back in a sharper shape. "Claire!" he called, loud enough for two nearby interns to glance up. She stopped, not because he deserved it, but because running from a man who had underestimated her would be the last favor she ever gave him. Daniel walked over with Vanessa beside him, confusion hiding badly beneath amusement. "Please tell me you did not come all the way here to make a scene." Vanessa looked Claire over, taking in her gray wool coat, simple black heels and calm face. "This is a workplace," she said gently, but the gentleness had teeth. "Maybe whatever personal issue you have should wait outside." Claire looked at her for the first time. Vanessa was young, pretty, and already learning the dangerous art of sounding polite while being cruel. "I agree," Claire said. "Workplaces should be protected from personal misuse." Daniel's jaw tightened. What is that supposed to mean? Before Claire could answer, the private elevator opened with a soft chime. Ethan Cole stepped out. Tall, composed, silver at the temples, wearing the kind of navy suit that did not need to announce money because everyone in the room already understood it. Conversation in the lobby thinned. Even Vanessa straightened. Ethan's eyes went directly to Claire, not Daniel. "Claire," he said, warm but formal. "The board is waiting." Then he looked at the security gate behind her, at the card still in her hand. "We will need your authorization before we proceed." The color drained slowly from Daniel's face. "Authorization?" he repeated. Ethan turned to him with professional courtesy and no warmth. "Mr. Mercer, I was told you started onboarding this morning." Daniel gave a stiff nod, trying to recover. "Yes. Senior Operations Strategy." Ethan glanced at Claire, then back at Daniel. "Then I suggest you spend the next hour remembering the difference between authority and entitlement." Vanessa's smile disappeared. Daniel stared from Ethan to Claire, then to the logo above the reception wall, where silver letters caught the afternoon light. Whitman and Cole. For the first time, he seemed to hear the first word as something other than decoration. Claire did not explain. She only stepped into the elevator beside Ethan. As the doors began to close, Daniel moved half a step forward, his voice lower now. "Claire, what is going on?" She met his eyes through the narrowing gap. "A board review," she said. "You should know. Your name is on the first page." The doors shut before he could answer, and as the elevator rose above the lobby, Claire looked down at the black card in her hand and realized the most powerful thing she had done all day was not entering the building. It was letting Daniel stand outside the truth long enough to feel the door close. The elevator climbed in silence, carrying Claire and Ethan above the bright lobby where Daniel was still trying to understand why the floor had shifted beneath him. Numbers glowed above the doors: 22, 23, 24. Each soft chime feeling less like height and more like distance. Ethan stood beside her without crowding her, his hands folded loosely in front of him, his reflection calm in the brushed steel wall. "You handled that well," he said. Claire watched the city rise behind the glass panel. Yellow taxis moved below like small pieces on a board. "I did not handle anything," she said. "I stood there." Ethan's mouth curved, not quite a smile. Sometimes standing still is the part that frightens people. The elevator opened onto the 37th floor, where the executive wing was quieter than the rest of the building. Thick carpets softened their steps. Frosted glass walls held blurred shapes of assistants, attorneys, and board members already gathered behind closed doors. At the end of the hallway, Conference Room 12 waited with its long walnut table and wide view of Manhattan under a pale afternoon sky. Claire had sat in that room many times, but always privately, always after hours, always as the quiet partner who preferred results over recognition. Today felt different. Today, her own history was sitting downstairs wearing a new suit and pretending not to panic. Ethan opened the door for her. Inside, 5 board members turned at once. A senior attorney named Margaret Shaw rose first, silver glasses low on her nose, a folder pressed to her chest. "Ms. Whitman," she said, "thank you for coming in." On the table lay 3 neat stacks of documents, each one marked with red tabs. Daniel Mercer. Vanessa Reed. Acquisition compliance. Claire's eyes stopped on Daniel's name, printed in black ink, so ordinary on paper, so heavy in her life. Margaret slid the first folder toward her. "We began the review after an anonymous concern from the acquired firm. At first it looked like favoritism during a transition hire. Then we found more." Claire sat slowly. The leather chair was cool beneath her hands. "Tell me." Margaret opened the folder. Mr. Mercer recommended Ms. Reed for a strategic marketing role connected to the transition team. Her qualifications did not meet the posted requirements. The interview notes were altered after submission. 2 internal objections were removed from the hiring packet. Ethan placed a second file beside the first. There are also messages suggesting Daniel shared confidential planning information before her application was approved. Claire's gaze moved over the pages. Dates, times, email headers, redacted lines. Nothing dramatic, nothing loud. Only the quiet paper trail of a man who believed charm could erase rules. For years, Daniel had called her careful when he wanted to insult her. Now his carelessness sat in front of her, cleanly documented. "Was anyone pressured?" she asked. Margaret nodded. A junior human resources coordinator tried to flag the issue. She was told by Mr. Mercer that people who slowed leadership did not last long in serious companies. Claire closed her eyes for half a second. She could hear him saying it. That same confident tone. Polished enough to sound professional until you noticed the fear underneath it. "Who is the coordinator?" "Maya Ellis," Ethan said. 29 years old. First year with the firm. Good record. Claire looked toward the glass wall, where the city seemed distant and sharp. Was she protected after she reported it? Margaret hesitated. That hesitation told Claire enough. Ethan's voice lowered. "She has been transferred temporarily away from Daniel's chain of contact. Paid leave was offered, but she asked to keep working." Claire opened the folder again, and something in her settled into place. This was not about a broken marriage. This was not about Vanessa's smile in a photo or Daniel's suitcase by the door. This was about the same pattern wearing a company badge. A man walking into rooms taking space, calling other people weak when they stood in his way. Claire touched the black access card on the table beside her, the small rectangle that had opened the gate downstairs. "I do not want this handled as my personal matter," she said. Margaret nodded. "That is exactly why we needed you here. As majority owner, your approval allows us to proceed under governance review, not domestic conflict." The words majority owner hung in the room, steady and undeniable. Claire looked down at Daniel's name one more time. 7 years of making excuses for him had trained her to soften sharp truths before they reached him. But leadership was not softness without standards. Love was not silence without limits. And mercy was not letting someone keep a title they used to harm people with less power. Ethan leaned forward. "There is one more thing. Daniel is scheduled to present his transition strategy to the department at 3 o'clock. Human resources will be there. Legal will be there. We can stop it quietly before he enters the room." Claire looked at the clock on the wall. 2:41. Downstairs, Daniel still believed the day belonged to him. "No," she said softly. "Let him present." Margaret's brows lifted. "Are you sure?" Claire gathered the files into one clean stack, aligning the corners with careful fingers. "Yes. I want to hear what kind of leader he becomes when he thinks nobody in the room can tell him no." At 3 o'clock, Daniel Mercer walked into the transition strategy room like a man stepping onto a stage built for his applause. The room was on the 29th floor, wide and bright, with a long glass wall overlooking 6th Avenue and rows of employees seated around a polished table. Some were from Whitman and Cole. Some were from the smaller firm being absorbed into it. All of them looked tired in the specific way people look during a corporate merger, smiling carefully while wondering if their jobs would still exist by Friday. Daniel mistook that fear for respect. Vanessa sat near the front with a tablet in her lap and a proud little smile on her face, as if his confidence belonged partly to her. Near the back, Maya Ellis sat with her notebook open, shoulders straight, eyes lowered. Claire noticed her immediately through the observation glass beside the conference room. 29, neat brown blazer. Pen gripped a little too tightly. Not weak. Not difficult. Just young enough to still hope rules meant something. Claire stood outside with Ethan, Margaret, and 2 human resources directors. The speakers carried Daniel's voice into the hallway, smooth and practiced. Leadership is not about keeping everyone comfortable, he began. It is about identifying who can move fast and who is standing in the way. Ethan glanced at Claire, but she did not move. Inside the room, Daniel clicked to his first slide. Bold words appeared behind him. Efficiency through decisive culture. He paced slowly, owning the carpet, the windows, the air. During my first week here, I have already seen a familiar problem, he said. Too many people confusing caution with integrity. Claire felt Margaret stiffen beside her. Daniel kept going. In a company at this level, hesitation is expensive. Sentiment is expensive. We cannot afford employees who hide behind process when opportunity is in front of them. A few people shifted in their chairs. Maya's pen stopped moving. Vanessa smiled wider. Daniel clicked again. The next slide listed proposed team changes. Maya Ellis's name appeared under a section labeled redundant oversight. Claire's face remained still, but her fingers touched the edge of the folder in her hand. There it was. Not a mistake. A pattern. He was not just defending what he had done. He was building a business philosophy around it. Some roles create friction, Daniel said. And friction slows winners down. One of the older managers, a soft-spoken man named Harold Price, raised his hand. Mr. Mercer, with respect, Maya flagged a compliance concern. That is not friction. That is her job. Daniel smiled without warmth. Harold, I appreciate your loyalty to your people. But this is exactly what I mean. Legacy thinking. Protecting feelings instead of outcomes. The room went quieter. Harold lowered his hand slowly. Maya looked at the table. Daniel turned back to the screen, confident now, almost energized by the silence. Whitman and Cole did not become powerful by rewarding fear. This building is for people who know how to make hard choices. Claire looked up at the logo etched into the glass door. Whitman and Cole. He said the name like he had earned the right to define it. Like he had not walked through its doors that morning on borrowed trust and hidden favors. Ethan leaned closer, voice low. That is enough. Claire did not answer right away. She watched Daniel point to Maya's name again, watched Vanessa whisper something to the person beside her, watched the faces around the table become smaller under the weight of one man's ambition. Then Daniel said the sentence that ended him before the paperwork ever could. People who cannot adapt should not expect protection from people who can. Claire opened the conference room door. The small sound cut through his presentation more cleanly than a shout would have. Every head turned. Daniel froze with the remote in his hand. Vanessa's smile vanished so quickly it looked almost rehearsed. Claire walked in first, Ethan half a step behind her, Margaret and Human Resources following in calm formation. No one spoke. Claire moved to the end of the table and looked at Maya, then Harold, then the rest of the room before finally turning to Daniel. You are right about one thing, she said. Leadership does require hard choices. Daniel swallowed. Claire, this is not the time. She placed the folder on the table. It is exactly the time. He glanced around, embarrassed by her calm more than any anger could have embarrassed him. This is a closed strategy meeting. Ethan stepped forward. Not anymore. Daniel's eyes flicked to him, then back to Claire. What is she doing here? The question hung there, ugly and revealing. Claire did not flinch. She lifted the black access card and set it beside the folder, the silver letters catching the overhead light. Listening, she said, and learning what you do with power when you think the people you hurt cannot answer back. Daniel looked at the black access card as if it were a trick, some polished piece of plastic Claire had borrowed to embarrass him. For 7 years, he had known her as the woman who remembered dentist appointments, mailed birthday cards to his mother, ironed the shirts he wore to meetings where he spoke about ambition. His mind could not make room for this version of her standing at the head of a Whitman and Cole conference table, while his own presentation still glowed behind him. Listening, he repeated, forcing a laugh that convinced no one. Claire, whatever you think you heard, this is business. You would not understand the context. A quiet breath moved through the room. Ethan's expression hardened, but Claire raised one small hand, stopping him before he spoke. She had spent too many years letting other people answer for her. Not today. Then explain it, she said. Daniel blinked. Explain what? Claire turned toward the screen, where Maya Ellis's name remained under redundant oversight. Explain why an employee who reported a compliance concern became a target in your restructuring plan. Daniel straightened, finding his manager voice again. Because companies have to evolve. We cannot protect every person who slows down progress. Maya's eyes lifted then, not fully, just enough to show she was listening. Claire nodded once, almost gently. And Harold Price? Legacy thinking, you called it. Harold sat very still, his hands folded in front of him. Daniel looked around the room, searching for support and finding only careful silence. I was making a point about culture. You were making a threat sound like strategy, Claire said. The words landed cleanly. Vanessa shifted in her chair. Daniel's face tightened. This is personal. Claire looked at him for a long second. No. Personal was Friday night. Personal was the ring you left beside a cold dinner. Personal was you calling me invisible in my own kitchen. A few eyes moved to Daniel, then away. Claire did not raise her voice. That made it worse for him. This is professional. This is a governance review. Margaret stepped forward and opened the first folder. Mr. Mercer, during the acquisition transition, you recommended Vanessa Reed for a role requiring 5 years of direct strategic compliance experience. Her submitted file showed 18 months of adjacent marketing support. Vanessa's cheeks flushed. I was encouraged to apply. Margaret nodded. By Mr. Mercer, according to messages we have reviewed. Daniel cut in quickly. That is not unusual. Leaders identify potential. Claire turned one page. Leaders do not alter interview notes after a hiring committee rejects a candidate. The room went completely still. Daniel's mouth opened, then closed. His eyes jumped to Vanessa. Vanessa looked down. There was the first crack. Not guilt yet. Fear. Margaret continued, steady as a metronome. We also have evidence that confidential planning documents were shared outside the approved transition group before Ms. Reed's appointment. Daniel's voice lowered. Those documents were harmless. Ethan spoke for the first time. They were restricted. Daniel tried a different angle, softer, almost pleading. Ethan, come on. Every acquisition has gray areas. You know how this works. Ethan's eyes did not move from him. I know exactly how this works. That is why we have rules. Claire watched Daniel absorb that, watched him realize charm was failing, watched the room he had tried to command become a mirror he could not control. Then he turned on the only person he still believed he could diminish. Claire, do you really want to do this? In front of everyone. She felt the old reflex rise in her chest, the instinct to protect his pride because she had once mistaken it for love. But across the table, Maya sat with her pen still in her hand, waiting to see whether the company's values were words on a wall or something with a spine. Claire picked up the final document. You are right, she said. This should not happen in front of people who came here to work, not watch you explain why standards only apply to others. Daniel exhaled as if he had one. Then Claire slid the document across the table. So we will keep it simple. He looked down. At the top of the page were the words employment termination notice. His face changed slowly, first confusion, then disbelief, then a pale anger he could not afford to show. You cannot sign this, he said. This requires owner approval. Claire took Margaret's pen. The room seemed to hold its breath. She signed her name once, clean and steady, beneath the authorization line. Claire Whitman, majority owner. Daniel stared at the signature. Then he looked at the wall, at the company name etched beside the door, and for the first time since he had walked out of their home, he understood that the woman he had called invisible had not disappeared at all. She had simply been standing above the door he was so desperate to enter. For a few seconds nobody moved. The signed termination notice lay in front of Daniel like a door that had closed without making a sound. His eyes stayed on Claire's signature, tracing the letters as if they might rearrange themselves into something less impossible. Claire Whitman. Majority owner. Not a courtesy title. Not a decorative family name on a building. Authority, written in blue ink by the hand, he once believed was only good for holding his life together quietly. Daniel gave a short laugh, but it broke halfway through. This is absurd. No one answered. The silence did what arguments could not. It let him hear himself. Vanessa pushed her chair back slightly, the legs whispering against the carpet. She did not look at him now. That hurt him more than the document. Daniel turned to Ethan. You are allowing this? Ethan's voice was calm. I am enforcing it. Because of her? Daniel snapped, then caught himself when several employees looked up. Ethan took one step closer to the table. Because of your conduct. Margaret placed another folder beside the notice. Your building access will be deactivated by end of day. Human Resources will provide details regarding final compensation and separation terms. You are not permitted to contact employees involved in this review, except through legal channels. Each sentence removed another piece of the life Daniel had dressed himself in that morning. Senior Operations Strategy. New team. New empire. It was all shrinking into a cardboard banker box he had not yet been handed. He looked at Claire again, softer now, trying to find the wife inside the owner, the woman trained to smooth the sharp corners of his mistakes. Claire, he said, her name almost gentle. Can we speak privately? She remembered how many times that tone had worked. At fundraisers when he insulted someone under his breath and expected her to smile. At dinners when he forgot promises and expected her to forgive before dessert. In their kitchen, when he left the ring and wanted her pain to stay quiet enough not to stain his exit. She looked at Maya, then Harold, then the other employees who had watched power misused and were waiting to see whether power could also be corrected. No, Claire said. This decision is not private. Daniel's face reddened. So that is it? 7 years, and you humiliate me in a conference room. Claire's expression did not change. You humiliated yourself when you turned ethics into inconvenience. Vanessa stood quickly, clutching her tablet against her chest. I should not be part of this, she said, voice thin. I did not know everything. Margaret turned to her. Your review will be separate. You will meet with Human Resources at 4 o'clock. Vanessa nodded too fast, then stepped away from Daniel as if distance could become innocence. Daniel noticed. Of course he did. The woman he had called his new life would not even stand beside him through the consequences of the old one. That realization passed over his face like a shadow. Claire almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But pity was not permission. Ethan signaled gently to the Human Resources director, who moved toward the door. Mr. Mercer, we will escort you to collect any personal items from the temporary office. Daniel did not move. His hand rested on the back of a chair, knuckles pale from pressure, though his voice remained controlled. You planned this. Claire shook her head. I planned standards. You planned around them. The words seemed to empty him. For the first time since she had known him, Daniel looked unsure where to place his confidence. He looked at the screen behind him where his slides still read efficiency through decisive culture, and then at the people around the table whose names he had tried to reduce to obstacles. Maya met Claire's eyes across the room. It was brief, almost invisible to anyone else, but Claire saw the meaning in it. Thank you. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just a small repair in a room Daniel had tried to damage. Claire picked up the black access card from the table and slipped it back into her coat pocket. The same card that opened the gate downstairs had now opened something far more important. A line between the past she had survived and the future she would no longer apologize for leading. Daniel finally stepped away from the chair. As Human Resources guided him toward the door, he paused beside Claire. You could have saved me, he whispered. Claire did not turn away. I did, she said quietly. For 7 years. You called it weakness. His mouth tightened but no answer came. Then he walked out of the conference room without the job, without the woman who had followed him there, and without the illusion that Claire had ever been the small life he left behind. The hallway outside the conference room felt colder after Daniel left, as if the building itself had exhaled and was waiting to see what Claire would do next. Through the glass, employees remained seated in a careful silence, still absorbing what had happened. Maya Ellis looked down at her notebook, then slowly uncapped her pen again. That small movement mattered to Claire more than Daniel's exit. It meant someone in that room had decided the ground was steady enough to keep working. Ethan stood beside Claire near the windows, saying nothing at first. Manhattan stretched below them in late afternoon light. All yellow cabs, rooftop water towers, and traffic inching through streets that did not pause for anyone's heartbreak. "You should take a minute," he said quietly. Claire almost laughed. A minute. People always offered women a minute after asking them to survive years. But Ethan was not pitying her. He was giving her space without trying to own it. She appreciated that more than she wanted to admit. "I am fine," she said, then felt the lie settle between them. Ethan did not challenge it. He only nodded toward the executive lounge at the end of the hall. "Then take a minute anyway." Claire walked there alone. The lounge was empty except for a long leather sofa, a bowl of green apples, and floor-to-ceiling windows facing west. She stood by the glass with her hands in her coat pockets and found the black access card with her fingers. Smooth edges. Cold surface. Proof that doors could open even after years of pretending she did not need them to. Her phone buzzed. "Daniel." She let it ring until it stopped. Then came a text. "Please. Parking level B2. Just talk to me once." Claire stared at the screen. The old Claire would have gone because guilt was a leash Daniel knew how to hold. The woman standing in the lounge went because she no longer feared the sound of his regret. The elevator ride to the parking garage was slow and quiet. When the doors opened, the air smelled faintly of concrete, rainwater, and car exhaust. Daniel stood beside a black sedan with a banker box at his feet. His tie was loosened. His perfect first-day suit no longer looked like armor, only fabric. Vanessa was nowhere in sight. Claire noticed that first, and Daniel noticed that she noticed. "She left," he said, trying to make it sound like information instead of injury. Human Resources asked her to stay upstairs. Claire stepped out of the elevator but kept several feet between them. "Then you should do the same. This is not the place for a scene." "I am not making a scene." His voice cracked around the edges. "I am trying to understand how my wife could do this to me." The word wife moved through the garage like something outdated. Claire looked at him carefully. "You stopped using that word before I did." He rubbed a hand over his face. "I made mistakes." "No, Daniel. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is taking the wrong exit off the highway. What you did was a pattern." He flinched because the sentence left him nowhere soft to stand. "I was unhappy." "So was I." The truth surprised them both. Claire had never said it aloud with such calm. "But I did not use my unhappiness as permission to diminish people." Daniel looked down at the box by his shoes. A company mug. A framed certificate. A few folders he was no longer allowed to open. "You could have warned me." Claire's eyes softened, not with forgiveness, but with final understanding. "I did. For years. Every time I asked you to be kinder. Every time I asked you not to speak over people. Every time I told you ambition without character was just appetite in a suit." He swallowed. For a moment, the man in front of her looked less like the person who left and more like the person she once tried to love into goodness. That was the cruelest part. There had always been something in him worth mourning. But mourning was not a reason to return. Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out the house key he had left behind Friday night. "I should not have said keep the house like that. I was angry." Claire took the key, turned it once in her palm, then placed it gently on top of the banker box. "You can keep it." Daniel stared. "What?" "I bought a new place before you left." His face went still. It was not the money that stunned him. It was the timeline. The realization that Claire's life had been moving without asking his permission. "You were leaving me?" he whispered. Claire shook her head. "No. I was preparing to stop disappearing." The garage lights hummed above them. Somewhere a car door closed. Daniel looked at the key as if it were the last proof that he had understood anything about her. Claire turned toward the elevator. Behind her, his voice came one more time, smaller now. "Did you ever love me?" She paused, one hand near the button. The question should have hurt. Instead, it felt like a door being tested after the lock had already changed. Yes, she said. That is why it took me so long to choose myself. Then the elevator opened, and Claire stepped inside carrying nothing of his. Not the ring, not the key, not the version of herself he had needed her to be. 3 months later, the ballroom on the top floor of Whitman & Cole Holdings glowed above Manhattan like a promise finally spoken out loud. Beyond the windows, the city shimmered in winter light, all silver rooftops and gold traffic lines stretching toward the Hudson. Inside, 200 guests stood beneath soft chandeliers while the company unveiled its new Ethics and Leadership Initiative, a program designed to protect employees who reported misconduct, challenge favoritism, and make sure no one had to choose between keeping a paycheck and keeping their dignity. Claire stood near the side of the stage in an ivory suit, one hand wrapped around a glass of water, the other resting lightly against the black access card tucked inside her pocket. She no longer needed to touch it to remember who she was, but tonight she wanted it close. On the wall behind the podium, the silver logo of Whitman & Cole had been redesigned with a new line beneath it. Power with accountability. Maya Ellis stood in the front row now, no longer looking at the floor, her notebook replaced by a leadership badge on her jacket. Harold Price stood beside her, smiling with quiet pride. Ethan Cole approached from the stage steps and held out the microphone without making a speech for her, without introducing her as someone rescued, restored, or remade. He simply said, "They are ready, Claire." She looked at him, and in his eyes there was no hunger to own the moment, only trust that she already did. Claire stepped onto the stage. The room softened into silence. For a second she saw a different room. The kitchen in Westchester, the cold dinner, the ring beside the plate, Daniel's key on the table like a favor he thought he was granting. She had kept neither. The ring now sat in a small glass box in her new office, not as a wound but as evidence. Some promises end. Some women begin there. Claire looked across the ballroom and took one steady breath. For years, she said, her voice clear, I allowed silence to be mistaken for weakness. I allowed loyalty to be mistaken for permission. And I allowed people who feared accountability to call it kindness when I protected them from consequences. No one moved. Even the servers by the doors stood still. But leadership is not loudness. It is not charm. It is not the ability to make a room afraid of disappointing you. True leadership is what you do when someone with less power tells the truth. Her eyes found Maya, and Maya's smile trembled just enough to show she understood. Tonight, Whitman & Cole is committing $1 million over the next year to employee advocacy, leadership training, and independent reporting support across every company we acquire. Because no career should depend on staying quiet for the comfort of someone more powerful. Applause rose slowly, then filled the room warm and steady, not the kind people gave out of politeness, but the kind that carried recognition. Claire stepped back from the podium, and for the first time in a long time, she did not feel like she was standing in front of her life explaining why she deserved it. She felt inside it. Later, when the speeches ended and the music softened, Ethan found her near the windows. You were extraordinary, he said. Claire smiled, looking down at the city. I was honest. That is usually what makes it extraordinary. He offered his hand, not as a claim, not as a rescue, but as an invitation. Claire hesitated only long enough to realize she was not afraid. Then she took it. They danced slowly beneath the glass ceiling while Manhattan glittered below, and the company name shone behind them in silver light. Somewhere in the city, Daniel would hear about the gala. The new initiative, the applause, the woman he had underestimated standing openly where she had always belonged. But Claire did not think of him for more than a moment. Her story was no longer arranged around his regret. As Ethan turned her gently through the music, Claire glanced once toward the logo on the wall and felt the quiet power of her own name. Not hidden, not borrowed, not waiting for permission. Daniel had left because he thought she had become invisible. In the end, he only proved he had never learned how to see.